going on, guys? Joe here again. I want to touch base with you for a quick second about how to study in nursing school. As much as it doesn't seem like it would be, it is very different than studying in your prerequisite courses. A lot of people don't even have to study during their prereqs. A lot of their prereqs, you kind of end up going through the motions. And now some people, already study great, and that's fantastic. But if you're anything like me and most of the people that I've spoken to that are in nursing now, their study habits in their prerequisite courses were not structured enough to really get them to succeed in the nursing school atmosphere. They realized that the way that they were studying to do what they needed to do in prereqs was just simply not enough for nursing school. And some would even say it's different than things like med school and CRNA school and things like that when you go further on, because they normally separate their didactic and their clinical studies, whereas when you're in nursing school initially, at least in the programs that I've heard of and the program that I'm currently in, your didactic, your book work, and your clinical work, your practical work is all at the same time. So I may go 2 days a week and do studies, book studies, and then another day or two a week to do clinical, like on-site with patients, putting into practice the things that I've been learning. So it's not just about learning the information that makes it difficult. It's about the fact that you have a very short window of time to get all that information retained and then be able to put it into practice with actual patients. So kind of in my journey into nursing school so far, I've come up with a system, the way that I study. It's going to seem maybe intuitive to some people. It's going to seem like it's almost silly to some people. I don't know. But for me, it wasn't. It wasn't immediately intuitive. I didn't immediately think, oh, this is how I should study to retain the most information. So I thought I would share it with everybody. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you have a specific way that you study you think would help other people watching this video, feel free to leave it in the comments. So I'm going to jump into the computer here and show you kind of how I do it from start to finish. So the first thing is, in most nursing programs, they allow you to have access to the slideshows, the presentations, prior to class. And it's basically just an outline, a general outline of the chapter that you'll be going over, the content you'll be going over in lecture. So one of the things I like to do is set up a dual screen like this. This is on one screen, but it's segmented into two, obviously. And what it allows me to do is it allows me to go through the slideshow, and basically create my own outline based on the information in the slideshow. The slideshows are great, and I've also seen some people print out the slideshows with the notes section so that they can write notes during lecture. I don't particularly like that. I think it takes up a lot of space. What I like to do is separate it like this to where you have, I can create my own notes on this side. This is assuming this is the first time I've seen this information, right? I haven't read this chapter yet. I don't know anything about this information yet. This is my first look, basically. When I know I'm getting into a new section, this is my first step. I pull up the slideshow, and then I have my notes set up. Now, I set up my notes a little bit different than most people do. I actually use Arial size 9 font, and then I use a narrow margin layout. So it's a 1/2-inch margin, which is half the size of what a normal margin would be. And what that allows me to do is just get a lot more text, right? So I can go all the way to a 1/2 inch on either side. So it allows me to kind of jam everything in there. For some people, this may be cluttered. So if it seems like it's too much information at one time for you, or in one section of the page for you, then space it, however you want, obviously. So that being said, basically what I do, the very first, my first contact, let's say, with the information is that I'm literally just going to copy, typing it in on this side, all of these slides, right? So I'm going through functions of the cardiovascular system, delivers vital oxygen and nutrients, removes waste products, transports hormones, and I'm literally going to create a section, main functions, delivers vital oxygen, removes waste products, transport hormones. I'm going to create that same section on my own notes. So this is my first exposure. This is my first time reading through the material, essentially. And I'm hitting all the major points that the professor or maybe the author of the textbook has laid out as being the main topics, right? So this is my first point of contact. And you can see, this particular slideshow is like 94 slides. So I believe this is 8 pages of notes, right? But this gives me kind of a Reader's Digest version, if you will, like a snippet, like all the main points in one section. Okay, so I'm going to put them all together on these pages and then print them out. And then it's going to look just like this. All right, which you already know, it's just a piece of paper. It's not that difficult. And I'm just going to staple that together, and now I have my notes for that chapter. Now what I like to do next is I like to make flashcards based on the information. So I'm going to open up my textbook, lay it out in front of me, and I'm going to go over to Quizlet, which is what I prefer to use. So let's jump over there. As you can see in my NRS 232 pathophysiology, we have, like, for instance, our respiratory system. I just go through, basically, open up my book, hit all of the terms, and then write the definitions in, right, for all of them. This is going to go through anatomy, some of the physiology behind it, and then it's going to go into, like, for instance, in patho, it's going to go into the diseases of these different systems, right? So this allows me to get my second point of contact for this information, right? I'm not, before I read the chapter, I've already seen almost all the information in the chapter twice at this point. So now I've read through, I've skimmed through the entire chapter to get all my flashcards set up, and I've also gone through all of the content in the chapter via the slideshow. Right, so I've gone through the content of the slideshow. I've skimmed through the entire chapter for the flashcards. And then after I make a set of flashcards is when I'm actually going to get in and read the material. And I'm literally just going to read word for word the entire chapter. So what this allows me to do is, before I've even read the chapter, I've already seen the information multiple times. Okay? Once I'm done reading the chapter, I've got my flashcards, I've got my notes. I normally do this prior to lecture. Okay? So for example, I'm studying right now and I have lecture tomorrow. These notes are actually for my lecture tomorrow. And so what this allows me to do is, by the time I sit down and listen to the lecture that my professor provides, I've already seen the material 3 different times. I've got notes based on this material, and I can write down questions as I'm reading, as I'm studying, and as I'm retaining lecture, as I'm hearing lecture. I can write down notes on top of the notes I already have to further store the information, further solidify that information in my brain. So what this system allows me to do is see the information 3 or 4 times before I ever actually get in front of my professor for the lecture. It allows me to have a deeper knowledge of the key terms because I've already studied them. I already have my flashcards set up. We're rocking and rolling at this point. And what it also allows me to do that I appreciate is ask the deeper questions and prioritize the deeper questions once I'm in lecture. Right, so if I've already seen it in my slideshow, I've put it in my own notes, I've done all my key terms, and then I jump in and read the chapter. If there's anything at that point that I don't understand, I can prioritize those questions for when the lecture happens. It's allowed me the opportunity to understand these diseases better when I'm actually in my clinical setting. When I'm practicing and I'm processing through these things. This patient has COPD. Why are we not giving them 100% oxygen? That's something I want to know. I want to know the practical implications and the practical pieces to that puzzle. If the first time I access this information is in lecture, I'm behind the ball. I'm trying to figure out the basic things of this information, the basic pieces of this information, and by the time I get to a clinical setting, I'm going to be treating a patient with COPD. And I was asking questions like, what's the difference between transudate and exudate, rather than, okay, I looked that up already. I've done the research on that. I've seen the key terms on that, so I don't need to know about that. But I did also see that we don't want to give 100% oxygen to a COPD patient. We want to titrate the oxygen and make sure their O2 percentage is at a certain range. And those are the questions I want to be able to have answers for. The idea is that if you can dig into the information effectively, if you can learn the information effectively, you have a better opportunity to provide better care to your patients, right? So get the slideshows, which are more than likely available. Most of the programs have them available. Basically, just transcribe that into your own notes. Just put all the exact same information. Maybe you add a couple things here and there into your own notes, your own outline, and then switch gears and go to key terms. Read through the chapter, skim through the chapter, get your key terms, and make sure you understand them. And then when you get to actually read through the chapter, you've already seen all the information a couple times, and it will flow much better than reading it for the first time. Once you've got all that, you've got your notes, you've got your flashcards, you can go to lecture at that point, and then you have the opportunity to ask deeper questions and have a better understanding. If you're anything like me, it's a lot more than you did during your prerequisite courses. But when you're in nursing school, it's just different. And I mean, there may be some people who don't have to study in nursing school, but I've never met them. I've never even heard anybody say things like that. So at the end of the day, instead of fighting the whole studying cycle and trying to figure out a way around it, my recommendation would be, let's isolate a system, a process that works best for you to retain that information, and then get into such a groove that it becomes second nature, where the flow of it happens, and then you're spending 2-3 hours studying and you've retained that information, rather than 5 or 6 hours cramming before an exam and you really didn't retain the information. You may have passed the exam, but you didn't retain the information. So then you're practicing, a couple years down the road, and you're relearning the information. You don't want to be in a spot like that. At least I don't. So if that added any value for you guys, if that gives you any kind of tips or tricks, hit that like button. If you have your own tips and you have your own system that you use, maybe use a color coordinated system for, different functions. That's fantastic. Put that in the comments. Let me know. I'd love to hear it. I'd love as much advice as possible. And anybody else watching this may enjoy that too. So leave your comments down in the comment section. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let me know what you think.